All right, welcome everybody to the fourth episode of Sports Consiglieres. I am Jerry Calla, your host. My co-host Jim Whalen is on assignment. We sent him to hunt down Rick Carlisle after that game one debacle, but I have to take a Pacer swipe. I have to swipe at the Pacers, if you will, being a Knick fan. Today, before I introduce you to our very special guest, I just want to lead into this. Growing up, obviously, sports was a big part of my life. As a kid, you identify with certain players. For me, the first player that I identified with that really made an impression on me was Reggie Jackson. Then it was Phil Simms. And then as a young player in a CYO program in Jersey City, I was encouraged by my coach to start following and getting into college basketball, more so than the pro game. With that being said, like I said, Reggie Jackson and Phil Simms were two players that made a really lasting impression my whole life now, as I'm 50 years old. But I will say the first team or the first program that I fell in love with was the Georgetown Hoyas. And I could say growing up in my neighborhood, we had a split of St. John's fans, North Carolina fans, and I was the only Hoya fan in the neighborhood. And a big part of that was the 1984 championship team, led by the gentleman that has been so gracious enough to join us, number 22, the captain, lockdown defender, with DC roots. I believe one of the first players or one of the big players to actually go to Georgetown from the DC area. I could be incorrect on that, but I am so honored on a personal level and professional level to have Gene Smith. Gene, welcome to the program.
Thank you so very much for the invitation. It's rather timely. This is the 40th anniversary of that 1984 national championship run. So I am gracious and thank you for having me.
We welcome you again and again. I had to get rid of Jimmy today because he's not a Georgetown fan, so we could really get into a lot of things. But Gene, on a personal level, like I said, I'm a young kid getting into basketball, learning the game of basketball. My coach at the time, it's a CYO ball. He was ahead of his time. We would pop in VCR tapes, watch games. And the one thing, watching the Big East, growing up, in the Northeast, and Georgetown really struck a chord with me as soon as I started watching. Togetherness, in between each foul shot, the huddle, the camaraderie. You just felt the passion, and that's something that left a lasting impression on me. And right away, the one thing that really struck a chord is that more so than other teams. Again, this is a kid's perspective, but I think as I gotten older, I started to understand it better. Is just how close was that locker room? How close were you guys? Starting from your first year, at Georgetown University.
I think you touched on some key topics of what made up the program in the 80s, and then took on a life of its own. So I arrived on the hilltop in 1980, the fall of 1980. Georgetown was coming off of a Final Eight appearance, 79-80 season. And so it kind of set the tone, I think, for what the next decade was going to entail. Thompson got there in 1972. So he was able to benefit from the fruits of the DC basketball family. So by the time I got there, he had already established that this was going to be a program that was going to be rooted or birthed around DC basketball. So with that being said, what he had instilled was a program that was going to have, how should I say, leadership. Seniority was going to be first. There were rules and principles in place that helped shape, I think, the success that was to come. So we were very, very disciplined. We were defense first, defensive oriented, tough nose. We always had an older guy on the team, and this is pre-portal, obviously, decades before the portal. But we always had an older guy on the team that gave you that stability, that being mature, So yeah, it was a program that was put together, and John Thompson uh, Jr. was the architect.
Now, you became a captain for your junior year. Am I correct in that?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. So now you go known as a lockdown defender. Um, I read somewhere now when you got recruited, or you didn't really get recruited, correct? Now
Correct.
Bill Martin was getting recruited.
Correct.
You and Bill were on the same team.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So coach comes down to look at Bill, and how does that develop where he's interested in you now?
And the story I get, the assistant coach at the time was Bill Stein, and he always reminds me that he was instrumental in getting me recruited to Georgetown. But my recruitment, or lack thereof, took place in the latter part of my senior year in high school. Bill Martin was a consensus All-American, so everybody and their brothers were in the gym. And the word I got is my hustle, my Court Thompson's eye. After arriving in Georgetown, I heard about another defensive stalwart by the name of Mike Riley. So I was kind of in that mold, defensive first. So Thompson always wanted a defense. He was going to have a defensive minded team, so he was going to have a defensive minded guard out top. And then when Patrick gets there, it takes it to a whole nother level. But with that being said, when Thompson offered me a scholarship, it was a foregone conclusion that I was going to go to Georgetown. Georgetown was just starting to ascend to a level of success in the DC area because, as I mentioned, they went to the Elite Eight in that 79-80 season and lost to Iowa in the Final Four in Philly. But also, what was very important that year is they beat the University of Maryland 3 times that year. And that was extremely important in DC, not only for bragging rights, but for recruiting rights. The DMV was pretty much Maryland was a team with Lefty Driesell. So that was kind of Georgetown letting everybody know, putting everybody on notice. So being able to go there my freshman year, it didn't really dawn on me because I wasn't heavily recruited. And I might have made some honorable mention throughout my high school career, but again, nothing of 5-star or 4-star or whatever. No McDonald's All-American, no City Classic or anything like that. But it was just, it was one of those things where I think the program always had, a player of lesser known fame that was able to become a successful college basketball player. And I kind of fit into that mold. And I think that's what made the Georgetown program unique. The fact that you had, Thompson being outspoken, being a black man at that time at a head coaching position at PWI, all of those factors just made for the perfect storm, so to speak. And 84 was the crescendo moment. But I think if you look at the fact that Georgetown went to 3 Final Fours in 5 years, something like that, and I was fortunate enough to play in 2 of them. But yeah, I just think it's a unique program that, and I don't want to get off on a tangent because I'm kind of emotional. This is the 40th anniversary.
Sure, absolutely.
But I don't think the program has gotten this unique. As unique as it is, it's proper due, but it's 40 years removed now, so I've been carrying this around for a long time. So
absolutely, and again, you talk about you get on campus, you don't have the fanfare, if you will, and if I'm correct, a big mentor for you, right, was the person as a kid that I thought had the greatest nickname, which was Eric Sleepy Floyd. Now, how much? Now, did you seek him out? Did he seek you out? Was that a right away thing?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned the seniority being very important at Georgetown, and Thompson was smart enough to give his players that confidence. He instilled this program in a way that, it didn't always have to come from him. So the older players were the model. So, before Sleepy, there was John Bebe Doran. There was Lonnie Doran. I mentioned Mike Riley. Mike Riley was an assistant coach shortly after I got there. I want to say the 82 season, 81, 82 season. And that's important because we went to the championship game in 82 and lost to Michael Jordan, North Carolina and Michael Jordan. But yeah, it was Bebe and Lonnie initially, and we had the Urban Coalition, which was the big summer league, comparable to the Rucker in New York, but that was our big league. So we always had a Georgetown team in that Urban Coalition, and that was a great way to stay connected to the streets, a great way to stay connected to the people, because those summer games were like magic. The whole neighborhood, the whole city was there. And that's kind of where John Doran, who had graduated, he was the first Georgetown player taken in the first round ever in that 80 draft. He kind of took me under his wing and just showed me how to play, showed me some nuances of the game. And I'm just an incoming freshman. And I just remember that as being huge for me. And Thompson was smart enough to kind of put the Georgetown system into that summer league team. So, bringing you along that way organically. And so you fast forward to my sophomore year, and that would be Sleepy's senior year. That previous summer, I was working out in the gym, and I was religious about working out because I had a pretty decent freshman year for somebody who wasn't supposed to play at all. I wound up starting the last 8 games of that season, my freshman year. So I was looking forward to, contributing, going to my sophomore year. So that summer I was working on my game, and I'm in the gym, and all of a sudden Sleepy just showed up and started working out with me that summer. And, naturally we got pretty close, but it was one of those things that, again, gave me confidence. It was unspoken. Like, it wasn't like he's like, I'm coming in here, because you can play defense and I'm an offensive player. But it was just one of those things where it just felt like I can play. I've arrived. I had a great freshman year, and now I have the best player on the team coming to work out with me. So we got close, and we had a Georgetown Summer League called the Kenner League. And Sleep and I actually wound up playing against each other in the championship game, which was, that was icing on the cake. So going into that sophomore year, I was full of confidence. We had an incredible point guard already by the name of Fred Brown. So our battles in practice were epic. I think it was serendipitous that him and we came in that year with five players our freshman year, and Freddie and I were the last 2 remaining seniors from that class, from that 80 class. So it was kind of prophetic that him and I got to win a national championship together. But we were rivals in practice. I mean, some of the practices at Georgetown were better than the games we played in, particularly in the 82 and 84 seasons. So yeah, it was one of those things where, again, you had mentorship through the older guys, and then when you became an older guy, you naturally did the same. Again, the program, we had ways about doing things. We always wore a coat and tie in the airport. We were always, kind to the officials. Like, we were quick to get on the floor and wipe up wet spots. Meanwhile, we would be playing incredible defense, using all of our fouls. But if you juxtapose that to how we carried ourselves, it was a nice balance. So yeah, I mean, I really, I can't overemphasize how much of a system we had. But as the game changed, the players became a little bit more important. And when I say important, the players just, with creativity, the way the game changed, the coaching was less of a, okay, this is the system we have, and we stick to this system, we play this way. Just became organically, it just changed. But Georgetown still was known for big men and defense. Um, and, and and again, we became Black America's team during that time, which I thought was powerful. Thompson obviously was outspoken. It was bigger than basketball to him, and I think again that's what I think made us a unique program.
Now, Gene, it's interesting. Now, so now you bring up race just now, and it was a big part of it. I mean, there's no question. I mean, on another note, not to make light of it, but I could tell you, growing up being a Hoya fan, I was the only white guy with a Georgetown starter jacket. I was the only guy with the navy and gray Nike high tops. I mean, like you said, I mean, it was, something different. I would say, the term which I love to talk about, Hoya paranoia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that became, and I think the team, the coach, I mean, the program, fed off that. But, it was a big deal. I mean, the way coach carried himself, in press conferences, like you said, being outspoken. When they had the Big East documentary on ESPN, he had the classic line, we met our obligations. We're not kissing anybody's ass. And there was and this was leading into my next question. You look back on it, and obviously there was probably a double standard of how the media, would treat the Georgetown Hoyas, and how they would treat NC State, how they would treat name a school. I mean, do you care to, can you please touch upon that, on how you felt the media treated you guys, and did you think it was fair?
The head of the snake was Coach Thompson. So how he carried it, we were going to carry it the same way, and not that we were robots, but it was just this was our family, this was our team. When we got in between those lines, nothing mattered other than the guy to your left and the guy to your right. And talking that way in the 80s with a head coach that was a 6'10" Black guy was challenging for some people, the media in particular. But I got to tell you, as a freshman, just being thrust into a world that I couldn't imagine. I was less concerned about that. That we had someone more than equipped to deal with that, and that was Coach Thompson. So we more or less took that lead. It was, I think, and I can speak now as a 60-year-old. So many lessons you were being taught that were life lessons, had nothing to do with basketball, and how coach dealt with the challenges, how coach dealt with the controversy, or the so-called controversy, how he dealt with the race issue, never considering himself or his program a victim. This is what we signed up for, but by the same token, this is the way we're going to do it. Like, this is how we're going to play the game. This is how we're going to approach the game. This is how we're going to prepare for the game. And we're going to prepare as if we're playing 7 against 5. He always said, he had a saying that we play to beat the cheat. And I used to think, what the hell does that mean? Like, well, we're going to prepare for the worst, and we're going to expect the worst, and we're going to weather any storms that we have to weather. We're going to stick together. We have our principles. We have our values, a value system, and this is how we're going to be successful. So it just became bigger than basketball. That was motivation for us. The fact that it was us against them. You mentioned the Big East, the requiem for the Big East is what you referenced earlier. And I thought that was the Georgetown 30 for 30. Because during that, they highlighted, I think, 3 teams, St. John's, Syracuse, and us. And the way they talked about us, I think, was the most impactful and the most powerful. Because, again, Georgetown won the first Big East tournament championship. Georgetown has the most, if not tied for the most Big East tournament championships with Connecticut or Villanova, one of those schools. But I say all that to say that Coach never approached the controversy in a way that almost like he didn't expect it, and he didn't create some of it. Because again, we fed off of it, and it made us tighter. Because Georgetown University is not a athletic powerhouse. It wasn't in the 80s. And I think we created that at Georgetown. And so if you look at Georgetown today, we only have 3 national championships, one in basketball, one in men's soccer, and I think it was 2022. And then we have women's cross country. But women's and men's lacrosse, multiple Big East championships. Track and field, always winning Big East championships. So I think the basketball team created this athletic environment where if you were, because Georgetown's known for its academics, but you can do both. And I think because of that success in the 80s and the 90s, that put a spotlight on the university in a way that it didn't expect. I don't know if Thompson expected it when he got there in 72. He clearly knew he was going to be successful because he carried it that way. I just think, doing it in D.C., which at that time was Chocolate City, doing it at Georgetown on the Hilltop, which at that time was 90% white, all of those factors were it was an incredible time. I don't think anyone knew at the time how big it was or how important it was, and how it was a breakthrough. It was a change in the guard, so to speak, particularly in DC. And I think at that time, East Coast team hadn't won a national championship for a while. Because you think about UCLA was dominating the 70s. So, so many things were happening. And Thompson was the right guy for the job. I'll never forget when we won the national championship and he was asked, what does it feel like to be the first Black person to win the national championship? And his response was, I resent the question. And I was like, I didn't understand it as a 17, 18-year-old, but essentially what he was saying was the question implies that a Black man in 1984 is not intelligent enough to win the national championship. Now, I'm sure the person who asked that question felt that he was being, challenged or was, felt a certain kind of way. But Thompson didn't care. Again, he was a perfect guy. He was bigger than the game. He had this symbol of a deflated basketball on his desk, which meant, okay, after the air goes out of the ball, what are you going to do? There's just so many things, man, that were, again, I think can be talked about, can be discussed for forever. I always hear all these people who talk about what Big John meant to them and what the program meant to them. But, you and I are sitting here talking about 40 years later, and ESPN didn't call me and nobody called me to do a similar interview. So
Right. Right.
And I say that with understanding because
I understand. Right. And now you talk about the relationship. Obviously, I feel the passion. I hear the passion, when you speak about Coach Thompson. Now, unfortunately, 84, the championship game, you're injured.
Yes.
Right. So now, after the game, can you kind of reflect and enlighten us about that powerful conversation that you and him had in the locker room after the game?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I guess it was a fitting end to my industrious career, because again, starting from the recruitment or the proposition, Gene, I'm bringing you here as a practice player. Those were Coach's words. And where can I sign, Coach? And then to end it with probably my best game in the Final Four game against Kentucky, probably my best game, even though I only played 17 minutes. The the significance of the game and what I was able to do in those 17 minutes. And then to not be able to play in the championship game just speaks to how deep we were, how difficult it is to win. Adversity always is going to set in. And how good that team was, how prepared we were, because during that run, Michael Graham, who was a freshman at that time, had a meteoric rise. Like, he was incredible in the Final Four. And then with my injury in the championship game, Reggie Williams, who was also a freshman on that team, gets a nod and winds up being most valuable player of that game. And what a lot of people don't know is Patrick was hurt during the Final Four. If you watch the tape, if you watch the video of the game, he has tape on his leg. So I think he had like a groin injury or a thigh injury. But those are things that Thompson was maligned for back then, because he wouldn't report that to the press.
Correct.
If he had injuries, he would keep it in house.
But to be fair, he wasn't the only one.
Exactly.
I mean, let's
Exactly.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, having not played in the championship game, I'm sure. I can be honest. Decades later, I was like, man, I wish I could have played. But at the time, because of the way the program was run, like, the first thing Thompson said to the team was, I want you to remember everyone that came before you. So we talked about the 82 losing in the chip. We talked about the 80 when they went to the Elite Eight. So all of these things, help shape you once you leave the hilltop, because it's not always about you, right? It's the team. It's the name on the front of the jersey. So yeah, it was, and between him and I, the moment we shared, there were no words. It was just, and there's a picture somewhere where it's just a handshake, and I felt that in that moment, he's saying to me, I appreciated you the 4 years, and I'm saying the same thing. I appreciate you giving me a shot. And I'm glad I didn't let you down, and most importantly, I didn't let myself down. I didn't let my family, my friends down. So yeah, it was a powerful moment. But I'm on record. The 82 team was better than the 84 team. And the 85 team that lost to Villanova, oh my goodness.
Right.
So, the program was so important, I think, to college basketball in the 80s, which, I hope one day is depicted. There are rumors that there's a documentary coming out, so stay tuned.
Maybe we'll be on this. Maybe part of this program will be on the documentary. But it's just a quick personal laugh for you. I talked as a young kid. I talked so much smack about 84 that after 85, we had a local sports store that had a Villanova with the Wildcat with their shooting percentage on the shirt, and I think everybody in my neighborhood, including their dads, and their parents bought the shirt just to taunt me. So,
I'm good friends with Chuck Everson from Villanova. He was a backup center on that championship team, and him and Reggie Williams that I spoke about, the incredible Reggie Williams, they got into a little scuffle right before halftime. And if you know that game, even though they shot the lights out, it was still only a 1-point game.
Correct.
So going back and forth. So that the scuffle before halftime, and Reggie got the best of the scuffle. It motivated them so much. Like, you could see them going into the locker room. Like, that was the perfect game on so many levels. And, of course, we came out on the wrong end, but again, many years later, and I'm friends with Chuck now, I'm happy for Villanova. I'm happy for him on a personal tip. But that was a Georgetown game to win.
Absolutely.
And Georgetown, again, I'm wishing the new Coach Cooley all the best of luck. But yeah, we've left some national championships on the cutting room floor, so to speak. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, let's rewind a little.
Okay.
82, Fred Brown, after that game in the locker room, I remember reading in Coach Thompson's book. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing now. He wasn't going to let Fred face the media alone, right? So now it described, obviously very, very, very emotional game, very, very, very difficult loss. Just kind of describe how Coach Thompson handled that, with the team, and then obviously specifically towards Fred.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and I remember as best I can. Like it's one of those things you can't prepare for, right? Like we literally have a guy on the bench in tears, and then you have Coach right in Fred's face, consoling him, and this is all happening live, right? Like, and we had 6 seniors on that team, which just spoke to, again, the maturity, the leadership. It was all there. Fred had an incredible game in the Final Four game against Louisville. So all of these factors, Georgetown hadn't been to a national championship since 1943. Nobody expected us to be there, and we ran. They had seeded us in the West because at that time, they took you away from your home, your hometown. So we had a lot of factors going. Big John was staying. We were staying 40 minutes to an hour away from where we played. Like, and I bring all that up because it was surreal. But I think Thompson handled it with care. Like it became bigger than just basketball. There was some shock. There was some, we had to gather ourselves. But definitely Thompson was locked in on Fred and made sure he understood that it was a team game, and we all did. I think we all made sure we dapped him up. But yeah, it was a building moment, right? Like because
Sure.
you don't you don't really know how you're going to respond to something like that until it happens. But I think because we were so tight knit, we handled it internally really well, and obviously we took the lead from Coach. But yeah, it's a powerful moment. Again, it just made '84 that much more. That's what you love about sports. I mean, the fact that Fred, not just Fred, but we all got a chance to experience it again. I think we had 4 players from that '82 team winning from the '82 team winning '84. So yeah, it was. I'm glad we got it in '84. We deemed ourselves. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is a great story. Like you said, it's bigger than basketball because recently that came up. The '82 game came up, and I said what I take out of that now, like 40 years later, is how that was handled. By the coach, and by the players. I don't really know if it would be handled even today. I mean, obviously more media, so on and so forth, but I don't think it would be handled, as well as coach could handle that situation.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
I really mean that.
well, not to get off topic, but I think you have a lot of, you've seen some established coaches kind of bow out maybe a few years before they were ready to go because, the game has changed. Less factors does the coach and the program control now with the NIL and the portal being involved. It's really interesting. And again, this is why I think the Georgetown story and Coach Thompson was so, I don't know, there's so many layers to it. How would Coach Thompson have fared in today's game? How would somebody like a Bobby Knight fare in today's game? Those coaches who controlled their whole program from marketing to branding, they were the pivotal person, and it'd be incredibly challenging. Coach Thompson, rest in peace. It wasn't until in his latter years, and this is in the book also, where he talked about he finally came around to, okay, yeah, we need to pay the players. Well, you balance that against, he was obviously players first, very much about the players, very much about the whole Proposition 48 or Proposition 49 was about the making sure that student athletes or prospective student athletes with lesser means were able to compete for athletic scholarships and not imposing unnecessary rules. So he was always about players first, but he was the last to the party in terms of paying players. And the way I figure that out, the way I understand that is that's about control. And Thompson was very much about control. And the '80s, I think, and decades prior, the coaches had more control. So it would have been interesting to see how he would have fared in today's.
So piggybacking off what you just said, and again, that's we talk about the NIL, but you brought up Reggie Williams. So now, me as a fan, as a Georgetown fan, and you don't obviously see this anymore because the college game has changed. Reggie Williams, freshman year, contributes in that in the '84 championship team, and then fast forward to see him become the player that he was. The latter part of his career. That was awesome to see that development, over more than 1 year, more than 2 years. You look at what attracted, why Georgetown basketball was so powerful in the '80s, togetherness, 4 years, camaraderie. The college game is definitely lacking. As every year it's really become, now it's becoming, free agency. And, like you said, that is why 40 years, 40-year anniversary, there should be a huge documentary, because we'll never see something like that ever again, where a team had such an impact on the sport and culturally, on society. I don't think that it'll ever happen like that again.
So if you will allow me, I want to say every player's name on the team.
Absolutely.
So we'll start with the seniors. Fred Brown from the Bronx, New York. Gene Smith from Washington, D.C. The juniors would have been Bill Martin from Washington, D.C., Patrick Ewing from Kingston, Jamaica, Ralph Dalton from Suitland, Maryland. Am I missing anyone? And then the sophomores were Michael Jackson from Virginia, Reston, Virginia, David Wingate, Baltimore, Maryland, Horace Broadnax, Plant City, Florida. And then I'm leaving out some guys that were on my team in practice. I would have been a Clifton Darasaw, who I think was a freshman, but he was an older guy, military guy. Clifton Darasaw. And then we had Victor Morris, who was 6'9", great practice player, very athletic, from Texas. And then our managers were Steve Wolf from Boston, George Jackson from Philly, David Green from North Carolina. But yeah, all you guys. And if I left out anyone, Michael Graham was a freshman. Reggie Williams were two freshmen that I left out. But yeah, an incredible team. We needed every player, every manager. It wasn't that it was a Cinderella season, because we had so many things that happened off the court. Players losing close family members. But it takes so much to win a chip, man. It really does. So many ups and downs. That year we were 34-3, so we only lost 3 games. But I remember, I just remember we lost a tough game to Villanova in overtime that year. And I think we might have lost to UNLV. They opened up a new arena. There's just so many ups and downs.
I believe St. John's, right?
St. John's that year. And just playing in the Big East, man, it prepares you for everything. But yeah, it was incredible. It was incredible. And having been on the '82 team and coming that close, because I don't know about other people, you know, you may enter college thinking you're going to win a national championship. That certainly wasn't me. But then once I got to be a part of what winning and success was all about, it only became natural to want to win everything. And that year we won the Big East regular season, won the Big East tournament, and we won the chip. So we left nothing. Any hardware, we taking all the hardware, and I couldn't think of a better way to do it. But again, because of the Georgetown way, you knew there were building blocks that had been put in place. And I think by time, after even with the loss of Villanova, the building blocks had been put in place. But I only think to myself, just think if we would have won in '82 and in '85. Like you and I probably wouldn't be talking.
Right.
There would have been a documentary. There would have been, what I think would have been appropriate. But yeah, it was an incredible ride. I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I mean,
well, Gene, this is an honor for me. I'm trying to stay professional here, but personally, Georgetown strikes a chord, and I'm going to get crushed by my co-host because I chose a different location to do this in my house. The last location I had right behind my shoulder was my '84 Patrick Ewing autographed championship basketball team. Very nice. Got it from my parents. It has the whole schedule on the ball.
So let me ask you, you touched on it a little bit in the opening. What attracted you to Georgetown? Like what about it? The way we played? Yeah.
It was so. Like I said, at the time, my CYO coach, he was really a guy. He was a young guy ahead of his time. He was bringing us to local games. Which was St. Peter's College. He had us play in the old Brendan Byrne Arena before Nets games, and he really encouraged to watch college basketball. And obviously, being a Jersey City guy, the Big East in the area, was a very big part of it. And it was almost like to a point. I don't want to use the word defiance, if you will, but it was like a good friend was a Carolina fan. My dad loved Chris Mullin, and it was like, wow,
I love Chris Mullin.
What was that?
I love Chris Mullin.
Yeah. I love him now. But and it was something different. But I think it was, you watched it and it was really the defensive, what you did on the defensive end of the court. And it just seemed that you guys were like really, really, really together. And I got to be honest with you, not to go back, to race, but, me being, a white male living in an urban area, I was like, this is different. And I was hooked, from day one. And to follow that up, many, many years later, I get a great anniversary gift from my wife. She gets 2 VIP tickets to Patrick Ewing's induction ceremony in the Hall of Fame. I go in and I am beside myself that we're basically mingling, if you will, with the who's who of, Georgetown basketball and Knick basketball. John Thompson, Coach Thompson, sitting in the corner, sitting down, and you could just tell the aura, the presence. And I went up to him, introduced myself, Mr. Thompson. And I'm not going to lie, when I told him that I was a Georgetown fan since I was 5 years old, he looked up. Other people that he greeted, he didn't look up. When I told him that, he looked up and he gave me a look. Wow, really? And we had a brief conversation, and it was a very big moment.
I asked you this question. The reason why I asked you this question was I lived in New York for 15 years or so, and like shortly after I started my professional career, I wound up in New York, and I was still somewhat active in ball. I was still playing ball. I was living in North Jersey before I actually moved to New York. I was going into the city to play ball. I was living in Jersey City, Pavonia, Newport.
Yep.
And if you
I was born and
Jersey,
raised there. I was on Greenville Avenue, Greenville side.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going into the city and I'm playing ball and I'm meeting up with guys I played with in the Big East. I'm playing against guys, and And it wasn't until then that I really understood the impact that Georgetown basketball had on people and how it was a certain kind of person, a certain kind of fan. The respect from, guys that I played against was unreal. Like just, because again, we were not very accessible as players during my time. We usually came in last to any of the big, Big East meetings or media days. We stayed our allotted time, but not 1 second more. So if we were required to do a media day, we weren't sitting around shaking hands and kissing babies. So to your point, there was a certain aura about us.
No question.
And, that was intentional.
Absolutely.
Because that spills over into the court.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I bring up New York because it was living in New York that I understood the appreciation, the respect, the admiration for the program and the way we went about things. And it normally was a person from the Northeast, right? A person from an urban area, but a person that had been maligned in a certain way or had been, had overcome some obstacles, right? And it when you're in it, you don't really think about it. Like I never thought that we were Black America's team while I was there. It didn't dawn on me. I mean, the fact that hip hop was just coming into its own or just getting started for all intents and purposes. And we kind of were part of that. We became part of the culture, all Black team in a predominantly white university. Some people thought we were HBCU. Like, where's Georgetown at?
Right.
So it was living in New York brought it all full circle for me. Like I was like, man, it was nice to be a part of that. Like I can speak to it in a honest and sincere way, and I feel like I can speak to it more because I didn't come there as a heavily recruited basketball player. Like we had guys on the team that nobody wanted. Like our Ed Spriggs is a legendary Hoya. He was a postman when Thompson found him playing in like a CYO or something. But little do people know that Ed Spriggs' brother, Larry Spriggs, played in the NBA, played on the national champion team with Magic Johnson. One of his other brothers, Greg Spriggs, was Sugar Ray Leonard's bodyguard for many years. I mean, there are all these stories
Correct.
and connections that just speak to what the program was made up of. And I have a saying or a thought. Like if I was ever to, someone asked me, about Georgetown and what are my lasting memories, and for me, I hope that part of Georgetown's program or the history and the legacy of the program will always be about DC and its Blackness, right? Like celebrating that. And we are on the hilltop. We are not part of basketball royalty. Like we're not the Kentuckys, the Dukes of the world, but you're going to be in a dogfight if you ever play against us, right? And it's that type of energy that I think the program will always represent, right? I mean, it started with DC cats. Big John is from DC. He's a DC guy. John Thompson Jr. Went to Carroll High School, played at Providence, played with the Celtics, came back to DC, spent some time in child development, like, his journey, coached at St. Anthony's. I just think what he's been able to do for DC and what DC has been able to do for him. He has a saying, one of the biggest compliments he was ever paid was someone said to him, "You wear your blackness well," and he just said that was a huge compliment to him, and I understand that now, right? But it's not a it's not a race thing, so to speak. Like it's not black against white, or it's just whoever you are, wear it well, right? And
Right.
stand for something. And if you're not invited to the party, find a way.
Right.
Find a way to get invited to the party. And again, like we stood for something
Right.
at that time when I think it was needed, right? So
And it's now let's flip the lens, if you will. Me obviously being a white person, and this is a credit to my parents becoming a Georgetown fan at that time. During those times, I didn't look at you guys as, oh, this is Black America's team, or this is a black team. I said, I love these guys. They play hard. They play defense. There's an edginess to it. I like the coach. He's got the towel. Let's strap up the laces and let's go. And and that's what it is. I mean, that's what it was. And like you said, you're not the Kentucky royalty or the Duke royalty, how UCLA royalty to a certain degree, but it was, that period means a lot, to a lot of people.
it was must see TV.
Must see TV, absolutely. And it was you guys, took the conference, to a whole nother stratosphere. You had the Big East network. I mean, that was unheard of. I mean, we could go on and on, but Gene, I want to end with this because listen, we're definitely going to have you back. We have to have you back. Maybe I'm the wrong person to interview you because I could be on till noon with you today, and I know you're on the West Coast, right? So you have the time difference, which we appreciate you coming on this early. But I want you to explain, and I'm paraphrasing here. I don't want to say that this was a direct quote of yours, but win every sprint so you can win every loose ball.
Mm. Mm.
So, I mean, and I think that quote, and obviously I'd love for you to touch upon that, but that really describes, Georgetown basketball. I mean, I could see in practice, winning every sprint meant something. You talk about you battling against Fred Brown. Nowadays, one of you guys would have transferred. I mean, really, iron sharpens iron. But today's student athlete, one of you guys would have. I'm not playing against this guy for the next 4 years. I'm going somewhere else. And I just want you to that quote I think really sums you up. Win every sprint, win every loose ball. I mean, you're known to be a defender,
Yeah.
and you were known to do the dirty work. And you were very modest earlier. Those 17 minutes against Kentucky might be arguably the best 17 minutes individually speaking in program history, and I really mean that.
Wow, appreciate that. And I do. I appreciate that. 40 years later, I appreciate it, man. I really do. For me, it was all about figuring out a way to get on the court, right? Like how can I get playing time? And I had always been defensive minded since the beginning of even playing basketball. So I was always going to be not just in shape. I was going to be in the best shape on the team. Like that was my goal. Nobody's going to be able to outwork me. I'm always going to be the last man standing. I'm going to win every sprint in practice because you practice the way you play, right? That's just habit. Quick story: my senior year, we're running like the last sprint before we go to the NCAAs or something, or something kind of impactful like that. And I lost the sprint, and all the guards on the team, because we ran by position, looked at me and went, "What's that? What's that all about?" I'm like, it's time for somebody else to take the reins.
Right.
But the fact that they noticed,
right,
was bananas to me, right? Like I'm taking off a sprint, like it's no big deal.
Right. It meant something to them, and it meant something to you.
But it meant
Yeah.
something to them. And what was always interesting to me, and Coach pointed this out, like usually your captain is, usually your best player on the team. Right? That's usually how it went back then. And when he made me captain my junior year, we were coming off of the '82 season, right? And I had been hurt a good part of that year, but I came back towards the end of the year. And Thompson always selected the captains. That wasn't voted by the players, and there was no democracy there. So when he made me captain, I didn't think, dude, you've been captain your whole playing career. Like that didn't pop into my mind.
Right.
What popped into my mind is, who's listening to me like that?
Right.
I'm coming off the bench, right? Like,
Right.
and he used to always say, I don't understand why they listen to him. Like, why are they?
Right.
But clearly they were. And I think it was just because they knew that, not that it meant more than me, but I was going to give every ounce of everything I had. So if I was only going to get 10 minutes, you're going to get 9 minutes, 30 seconds of pure just hustle. Like I'm coming in the game. Like he would call somebody else's name to come in the game. I would jump up and run in. Like
Right. Right.
So I think that energy, kind of spilled over. I wasn't concerned with being liked. There's a bit of a misnomer that championship teams hang out together and they all get along. It's couldn't be further from the truth. But when we were together, when we did practice, we were of one mind and one, like it was a machine.
Right.
And I mean, like, particularly in '82 and '84, those practices were crazy. Like I'm talking, we taped the doors during our practice, and even on campus, like at home, the doors were taped because what was going on in there was not for public consumption.
Right.
Like
Right. Right.
at it. And when I tell you Fred and I went at it, I'll tell you a quick story because I can talk to you. I can talk about this all day. Like this has been brewing.
Right.
When we were freshmen, we went on a trip to Vegas. Thompson took a team of high school seniors on a trip to Vegas, and Fred and I were part of the team. Another way for him to instill the Georgetown playbook into two of his incoming freshmen. So I'm on the plane, my first plane ride. I'm excited. We're going to Vegas. And so I'm studying the playbook. And Fred comes up behind me. I mean, Fred, top 10 player coming out of high school, like incredible. He comes up behind me and goes, "Hey, Gene, what you doing?" I'm checking out the playbook. Getting ready. He says to me, dead serious, no smile, "You don't need to do that. You won't be playing." I said, "Oh, New York DC feud is getting ready to start."
Yeah.
But it was that kind of energy, and he recruited those kind of players. But once the game started, we were focused in one mind and one vision. And not everybody had a great college career plan for Coach Thompson.
Right.
Because again, it was about the team, and it wasn't until you probably got to be a junior or senior that you really picked up.
Right.
Like, it's bigger than me, even though I may be the best player on this team. That's my role, to be the best player on that team. But
Correct.
This guy over here has a role too. I mean, we had guys who didn't play that were constantly standing up, engaged, locked in. And it was, you could see it. It was happening. It happened before you, and it was going to happen after you.
Right.
So it's a program that I owe everything to, and it's bigger than basketball. Like it set me up
Right, for life.
For life, and
Yeah.
just in terms of how to, go about things and go about the world. Like adversity is a given. How you deal with it is not, right?
Right.
Like it's just like, always try early, on time is half hour early. Like just all of these things that, you don't think about, you may complain about when you're younger because it's an inconvenience, but it's like once you master it, it becomes a tool. So yeah.
Well, Gene, I just want to. We're going to end it here, but I'm gonna extend the invitation. I'm hoping that you would join us again. Like I said, I could be on here with you for hours. Personally, as a fan, the program meant a lot. Your years meant a lot to me. Moving forward, like they said, the lessons that you learn, from coach, the lessons that, those spill over into people that were fans of the program, at that time. Professionally, we're just starting out our podcast here. So from the bottom of my heart, it means a lot that, you coming on and joining us. And I really, really, really hope, and I really mean this, I'm going to speak to my co-host. We're going to get in touch maybe right before college basketball starts up again, and we will have, really a show dedicated to the 40-year, anniversary. And I hope between now and then you're contacted by ESPN to do a documentary because you guys deserve it.
It's so funny. For whatever reason, Stephen A. Smith has my name stuck in his head. It is only when he's talking about Pearl Washington, which I can kind of understand. Right. But it's like, okay, so clearly they remember.
Right.
But
right. Like, they got to put it together. They have to connect the dots a little bit better.
Because of all the people ever talking about me, I never thought it would be Stephen A.
Smith, right?
But listen, man, appreciate you guys.
Gene, thanks a million. I appreciate it. It was great chatting with you. All the best to you, and we'll be in touch.
Cheers.
Thank you.
All right.
This is Jerry Calla. Again, Sports Consiglieres. We'll be ending. This will be episode 4 with legendary Georgetown Hoya, number 22, Gene Smith. The next episode, Jimmy and I will be back. Please follow us on our social media account on Instagram and on Facebook. Have a great day, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Take care now.